Being a lover of watches is an individual journey, but I think at the core of all of these individual journeys is a foundation of just knowledge of terminology that I think every single person should understand. What's going on, everybody? Teddy Baldassarre here, and in this video, we're gonna be looking at key watch terminology that every watch enthusiast needs to know. All right, guys, let's get it going. All right, guys, so to start us off, I wanna look at 10 major components of a watch that are pretty much unchanged no matter what watch you're looking at. Of course, there's some exceptions, but I think this will be a great foundation for us to start at. Starting with the case of a watch. Very basic. This is the watch's outermost molding that provides the general shape and protects the inner workings of a watch. But off of the case, you will see a couple protrusions. Those are what are referred to as lugs. Lugs are these projections on the watch case that are used to secure a strap or a bracelet to the watch case. Of course, they come in various sizes and shapes and are just as important as the case in dictating the overall appearance of a watch. One thing you always want to make sure that you are on top of when purchasing a watch is the lug to lug width. That's going to determine the type of straps that you need to buy or bracelets. So now for the next one, straps and bracelets. Pretty basic again. These refer to either a strip of leather or rubber that holds a watch on the wrist. So that's what we're referring to as a strap. And a bracelet is of course a watch band made of metal. There are many different types of watch straps and bracelets, and I think a video in the future is definitely necessary. And I am going to be releasing a watch strap line. I know I've been promising this for a while, but if you do want to stay up to date with the information, I will link to the website down below where you can be given updates as it's about to happen. So we're probably a few weeks away, I promise, guys. So when you're looking at a watch case, of course you see the lugs, they're very notable, but you also see another knob on the side of the watch, mostly at either the 3 or the 4 o'clock position, and that is called a crown. So a crown is a knob on the outside of the watch case that's used to set the time, the calendar, depending on the watch, and if it's a mechanical piece, is used to actually wind the watch. So now we looked at the outside, the case of the watch, and the few components that make up that part of the watch. But now let's look at more of the inner workings of the watch, starting with the dial. So a dial is a plate base that's visible through a crystal of a watch that carries a certain indication, such as hours, minutes, seconds. One thing to differentiate here is I often hear people referring to the dial as the face of the watch, which isn't technically a real term in terms of just the watch community. Of course, this is really getting into the semantics of everything, but I do think it's probably better to call it the dial than it is the face if we're talking from a technical standpoint. So now we have the hands, and the hands are indicators that move over the dial to point out the hour, the minute, or the second. Most watches have 3 hands, but there are certainly some exceptions, like a GMT hand, for example, to measure 2 different time zones. So for this next component of the watch, there is a lot of ways in which I've heard it being described, but there's really one widely accepted way, and that is referring to it as the crystal. And the crystal is a transparent component of a watch that can be made of glass, plastic, sapphire, or other materials that help with protecting the dial and inner components of the watch. I've done a whole video on the different types of crystals, so if you do want to watch that to really understand the differentiating factors here, I will certainly link to that in the description down below. The next component here is the bezel. And this is a component of a watch that typically is made of metal that makes its home around the crystal on the top portion of a watch and holds the crystal in place on top of the case. All right, so now we've looked mostly at the front anterior part of the watch, but let's look at the back of the watch and really where the heart of the watch resides. Starting us off is the case back, and the case back is the reverse side of a watch case that can be removed to access the inside of a watch. All right, and finally, probably the most important aspect of any watch is the movement. So the movement refers to the inner working mechanism of a watch. You might also hear this being referred to as a caliber, particularly when a manufacturer is selling it on their site. Another important distinction here about movements is that you'll see 2 primary types, one being a quartz, the other being a mechanical movement. Quartz movements are powered electrically by a quartz crystal, a technology that was first developed in wristwatches in the late 1960s and power nearly 98% of the watches on the market today. And then on the other end, we have mechanical movements. These are watches powered specifically by gears and metal inner workings like springs and balance wheels, and are broken down into 2 main subcategories. The first being manual wound movements, in other words, watches that will only work unless their crowns are wound and winding up the mainspring, and the other type of movements are automatic movements. Automatic movements feature a rotor that circulates around the movement that helps wind the watch's mainspring by simply wearing it. And I think these 2 subcategories underneath mechanical movements is something I see misconstrued very, very frequently. Understanding that mechanical movements encapsulate both hand winding, and then also automatic. And there are some automatic watches that also have hand winding capabilities. So just another thing to be familiar with. All right, so those are the 10 universal or mostly universal components of a watch. But let's go and take a look at 5 other terms that are going to be important for you when you're looking at the whole range of watches out there. First up is an aperture or a window. And these are small openings in a watch dial that display certain information such as a date, day, month, or moon phase. The most common of which is a date window. However, there are a lot of different varieties here. The second component are indices. These are markings on a dial of a watch that are used to represent different points of time, such as hours. In higher end watches, these are usually applied or attached to the dial rather than printed on. Next, we have luminescence, or also known as lume. So lume is the glow given off by watch numerals, indices, and hands that have been coated with a photoluminescent material. Lume is commonly seen on tool watches like divers and pilots' watches where legibility is absolutely crucial. Next, we have subdials, and these are separate from the main 3 hands that you'll often see on most watches, the hour, minute, and second hands, and will be displaying either a separated seconds function or will be displaying different actual dials and measuring different elements of time, like you'll see with a lot of chronographs. And as we're speaking about chronographs, we have another important aspect of chronographs, and that is the pushers. So pushers are the buttons located on the outside of a case of a watch that control specific functions of a chronograph, such as setting and resetting of a chronograph. All right, guys, so those are 15 different watch terms that I think every single watch lover needs to know. And I know for many of you, you probably know all of these. However, I think if we do want to foster up this new generation of watch lovers, something I talk about on this channel all the time, I think it's important just to take a step back and understand that your own ability to know something can sometimes inhibit you from helping bring more people on board to something that you love. And that's really what I wanted to do with this video. All right, guys, if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe. Also hit that bell icon. If you did like this video, that's a big help for us by hitting that bell icon. Be sure to go follow me on Instagram, fill out the watch form down below if you want to be entered to win our watch giveaway. And then finally, if you want to support this new generation of watch lovers, like I just mentioned, please go to our Patreon. Any support there would be greatly appreciated. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.